So receiving this invitation, as Tara mentioned, it really took me back to my own experiences in this building, as well as the more general memories of my childhood growing up in Great Neck. I thought about classmates, especially since I just saw many of them at a high school reunion, and particularly thought about two stories I knew well, stories from my class that I wanted to share with you as we begin our time together tonight. I remember one girl whose bat mitzvah service went perfectly. Every single prayer and speech delivered flawlessly, most of them memorized. She made that and seemingly everything else look so easy. She was well-liked, invited to countless bat mitzvahs, often 3 a weekend. I'm sure some of you can relate. And a few years later went to the prom both her junior and senior years. She was admitted early action to Harvard, spoke at graduation, and was the North valedictorian. Newsday even did a cover story on her. I also remember a girl whose bat mitzvah that very same month in this very same chapel began with the less than perfect realization that the videographer didn't show up. After her best friend left for private school, her experience navigating the high school social scene was tough and lonely. She found solace in a teacher and with her family on the weekends. Her dating life wasn't much better, and she went to the prom with a close friend because she was too shy to ask the guy she liked. Oh, and academically, her guidance counselor and the teacher writing her recommendation told her she was unlikely to get into Harvard because her verbal SAT score was in the 500s. So how many of you think I was one of those two students? The first, and that I'm here because I'm some sort of wild success story, and that was merely the first chapter. Or maybe I'm the second, and I'm here to teach you that even if seemingly nothing goes your way, life eventually turns around and you may still be invited back to speak here at Hebrew High School 25 years after you graduate. So how many of you think I'm the first? And how many of you think I'm the second? Well, what if I told you that you're all right, that I was both, which is in fact the correct answer? See, here's the thing. How we each tell our story, what we decide to see, to say, to share, that part is entirely up to us. We can choose to share all of the highlights or all of the lowlights, or we can just tell the more integrated, complete story, which almost always contains both. This isn't just true for the bigger picture of our lives, but also, I would say, for almost every single experience we have, which gives us an opportunity every single day to choose what we focus on, and therefore, the lens through which we interpret our lives. This is where faith comes in. I believe Judaism teaches that our journeys are ours for a reason. There's purpose in both the prosperity and the pain. The concept of basher, of meant to be, is often used to describe a soulmate, but it needn't be limited to that. What if we also think of our entire life that way and trust that whatever comes our way, meaning the things we choose and the things we wouldn't, that maybe, just maybe, it's all meant to be. So going back to that story from before, the two stories, my two stories, or really my one story, picking up where we left off. In my 4 years at Harvard, I got 1 B+, a few A-, and almost all A's. As you can probably guess, there were countless times I'd look at that transcript and instead of feeling pride in all the A's, I'd be super annoyed by that 1 B+. Until I realized I could be grateful for it. You see, that grade was from my freshman fall, my first semester of physics, my intended major. I hadn't been particularly excited about the class. I had no interest in studying, and yet it wasn't until I got the B+ that I paused, wondering if perhaps the subject I had loved so much in high school wasn't really one I wanted to study in depth for 4 years. At the same time, I needed to enroll in spring courses, and my dad suggested I try psychology. Psych 1 met Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m., as luck would have it, the same exact time as the second semester of physics. Simply put, I couldn't try psych without pausing physics. I needed to choose, at least for that semester. So that B+ ultimately became a gift because it inspired me to try something new. And that something new opened my eyes to something I loved and I still love today. It took my willingness to understand and accept that I didn't want what I originally thought I wanted, that my heart knew I wanted something else, something better for me, and the combination of the B+ and the scheduling conflict were both nudges I needed to find it. After graduation, with a degree in psychology, as you may have guessed, I worked at a top consulting firm, was promoted quickly, and then went on to earn 2 master's degrees from Stanford in 2003. 15 years later, last spring, I was voted the most inspiring member of our business school class and invited to speak at our reunion, mirroring a similar opportunity I'd had at my college a year earlier. So let's pause again, because I really want tonight to be interactive, because I believe you can all teach me as much as I can teach you. What do you think got me those invitations from Harvard and Stanford, and for that matter, to come here today? Anyone brave enough to raise their hand?
Really courageous personality.
Courageous personality?
Yeah,
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, I hope that was part of it. I don't know, but thank you. The truth is, I don't think it's anything on my transcripts or my resume that really got me up on those stages. I have countless classmates at both of those alma maters who are far more successful in terms of job titles or salaries or anything else you would think is a criteria for selection. So what if I told you that the biggest challenge of my life, the biggest blip, the thing that wasn't supposed to happen, the thing that scared me and scarred me the most, has also been my biggest teacher and gifted me more opportunities than I ever could have imagined, including our time here today. 3 years ago this month, I was simultaneously recovering from major surgery and preparing to begin chemo. I had been diagnosed with breast cancer 2 months earlier, and life suddenly got turned upside down. It was one of those defining moments that divides life into before and after, and there's simply no way to go back. Not like that bat mitzvah service, which we could and did recreate a month later with the videographer, and not like those SATs where I could retake the test and get my verbal score up a lot. This was a cancer diagnosis. Surely this was different. I lost my breasts, I lost my hair. I lost the independence I had known my entire life. I lost my seemingly limitless energy, although apparently I've gotten it back, thank you, and seemingly perfect health, and in turn, the ignorance I had about my mortality and my control over it. It would be easy to dwell on that list and believe life would never be the same. And truth, my body would never be the same, although looking at me now, you'd never know it. It's kind of amazing, actually, how quickly we heal sometimes. My hair grew back, my scars are all hidden beneath my clothes. Honestly, there are days where I look in the mirror and I don't even see them, which is something I never thought would happen. Life is a constant ebb and flow. Something threatens our everyday sense of normal, and we assume a new normal, one we get used to and can grow to appreciate sometimes as comfortably as the one we originally knew. Humans are amazingly resilient and adaptive creatures. We adapt and we readapt, and we continue to do this each time we are tested, continually finding more and more strength if and when we choose to. And if you think about it, this is often as true for good things. We get excited for something good, making the cheerleading squad or a sports team, getting into the college of your choice. But then we habituate to the new normal of having that in our lives, and it becomes par for the course. It happens with adults with promotions and raises, and if we keep focusing on extrinsic measures, we may never find sustained happiness because quite frankly, there's always more. Always a higher salary to be had, a better job title. It's easy to aspire for more, and that's fine so long as we simultaneously choose gratitude for what we already have if we want to truly be at peace with our lives. That's a choice I've continually had to make over the past few years. My biggest struggles with cancer came after everything was fine. Last March, less than 2 years after I finished chemo, my oncologist felt another lump in my breast. The likelihood of more cancer there was super small, and yet, as is often the case, sometimes things that are highly improbable are still possible. I held out hope until a subsequent appointment when I could tell that my surgeon didn't like what she felt, and a few days later I got another cancer diagnosis, a recurrence, which was my worst fear. Somehow, amazingly, I wrapped my head around that much faster than I expected to, and although I wasn't thrilled, to say the least, I knew a local recurrence, which means anywhere in the chest area, was still considered completely curable. So I meandered a path between horrified and hopeful, and although I had no plan for cancer, again, to say the least, I also had the gift that comes with knowing that I had been through it once before. And better yet, this surgery was far less of a big deal, only 20 minutes, not 6 hours, and it was outpatient. And most likely it wouldn't be followed by months of chemo. And all of that proved to be true. Recovery was so swift that I didn't miss a single weekly dance class. I was in great spirits except for one thing. My hip had lit up on a PET scan, which is the test that doctors use to see if cancer has spread. The thing about my hip was that it had hurt for a full year and a half, and it had already been scanned several times. Doctors at top 2 cancer institutions ultimately concluded that it was just my body in a unique way, but not cancer. But on the heels of a recurrence, everyone wanted to be sure to put my mind at ease, so we scheduled a biopsy for the following week. I still remember walking down the street in Manhattan when my phone rang. I recognized the number, and I was hopeful that I was finally able to catch a break. My oncologist sounded chipper on the phone, and I naively told myself my hip must be fine. So it's not cancer, right? I said. I asked for the first time, hearing a confidence in my voice, reacting to her own upbeat energy. And then I heard the answer I dreaded. Oh no, she said, it is. So here's the thing about breast cancer. It could come back as many times as it wants to, locally in the breast, and it's still considered curable. But once it spreads anywhere else, the language that the doctors uses changes. It's metastatic, it's stage 4, it's incurable. Words that no one, no matter how optimistic or upbeat, ever wants to hear. I immediately started crying, sobbing. There I was on 23rd Street, completely falling apart, my worst fear about cancer now true. I had long believed that if this were my fate, this would be the moment that I crumbled, the moment I climbed back into bed, said game over. And yet none of that happened. Instead, as I reflect back on the past year, I'm truly in awe of how resilient I was, of how resilient I believe we all are, each and every one of us, each and every one of you, with the cards we are dealt when we choose to accept them. I don't want to pretend life is perfect because it isn't. I take a lot of medicine with a myriad of side effects. I regularly get painful shots. I usually throw up from my PET scans. I occasionally have weeks where I spend more time in doctor's appointments than I do at work. Oh, and there's that whole incurable thing too. So although my meds are working and keeping everything in check, the doctors aren't telling me I'll ever be cured. But here's the thing. I'm not so sure they're actually right about that, because even if that's true today, I'm lucky enough to be facing this at a time when research advances are happening so fast. And for now, I am immeasurably grateful that I usually feel great. My body is incredibly strong. I am in awe of how much it has withstood and how quickly it has gotten used to a bunch of new medicines that miraculously are doing their job. In fact, they're doing their job so well that my PET scan, merely 3 months after I started the new meds, was as good as it could be. So yes, there are side effects and shots and scans, and I could choose to be really bummed out about those. Or I could choose to be grateful for the fact that these side effects are manageable, the shots are infrequent, and the scans provide me with some reassurance that the meds are actually working. So 3 years into my cancer journey, here we are. Here I am. Here not because of Harvard or Stanford or any professional accomplishments, but instead because life tossed me a huge curveball. Now, if you knew me, and you now know a little about me, you'll probably guess I'm a bit of a type A control freak kind of girl. So I pretty much did everything I could to avoid being in the situation I'm in now. I got screened regularly, was on top of things, did everything I was supposed to do, and yet I still have cancer. Life isn't always going to work out perfectly, no matter how perfect you yourself may be. And I know because I sat in your seats once that at least some of you probably think you are. But even if you do everything right, which you won't, but let's pretend you do, someone else or something else, some force beyond your control, will come and do something that will impact your life in a material way and send you down a path that you wouldn't otherwise have found. I challenge you to find the opportunity in these moments, even and especially when it's hard to see. Because although we cannot always choose what happens, what cards we are dealt, we do get to choose how we play them, how we find gratitude, even for the littlest glimmers of light in the darkest days. I never asked why me because it would be just as easy to ask why not me. We don't question the good luck in our lives. I mean, really, how many of you wake up every day and question why you were lucky enough to grow up in an affluent town with amazing public schools where you can practice Judaism freely in a predominantly Jewish community? You may appreciate it, but you probably don't question it. So if we don't question the good luck in our lives, I don't believe we should question the less lucky things that happen to us either. Or perhaps when those seemingly less lucky things had come our way, those challenges, we can ask why me in a positive and productive way to find meaning and purpose in journeys we may not have chosen, but nonetheless are living. I stayed away from support groups much of last year, even when I was struggling most, because I worried that sharing news of my recurrence, my own worst fear before it actually happened, I worried that that would trigger anxiety in someone else who is navigating the new normal of life after cancer. So I steered clear of group until the social worker who ran it reminded me that I actually had an opportunity that I could simply, by showing up, by being my authentic self, by sharing thoughts similar to those that I'm sharing today, that I could help others adjust their perspective of what metastatic breast cancer looked like and how it impacted life. And maybe, hopefully down the road, if one of them faced a similar diagnosis, that maybe they'd be just a little less scared than I was, because part of what scared me the most was that I had never met someone like me who was ahead of me on this journey. Cancer's inspired me to trust life is on my side, that even if I can't always immediately, or maybe ever, know the why, I need to trust the what. I believe if we look for meaning, we'll find it. It's truly self-fulfilling. If we believe the cards are stacked for us in our favor, we'll find moments throughout the day that reinforce that belief. And if we believe the opposite, we'll likely find evidence of that instead. It's not always easy, though, and as with anything in life, it becomes easier the more we do it. It's why people often say that they practice gratitude. It's truly something to be practiced. In reality, everyone's life, and I do mean everyone, no matter how perfect anyone else's may look from the outside, or how challenging yours may feel from the inside, everyone's has both. It's always easy to wonder why we are struggling or whether we are struggling more than someone else, especially in high school and especially with social media, because we're often comparing our toughest moments to someone else's best day ever. Just because someone seems happy doesn't mean he's not struggling with depression. And as I now know firsthand, just because someone looks healthy doesn't mean she's not fighting for her life. Some of our challenging days or moments are obvious to others. More often, I suspect they're not, that sometimes they're completely invisible. At times, that's a gift because things still feel and look totally fine, and we can get by for periods of time pretending they are. But that's tough, to hide a part of yourself, especially if it's an important part of your journey. Sharing your stories takes courage. It's vulnerable to open up your hearts and scary to show your truths. If you're like me, the fear isn't that you don't want someone else to know how you're doing, but rather you don't want to be judged because of it or have life be different because of it. In fact, usually we desperately want people to know what's going on in our lives, but our fear of rejection, it interferes with our quest for connection. And I believe that connecting with one another, with me, with your classmates, I believe that's what we're all here to do, with all of our challenges as well as our triumphs, because that's how we support, inspire, and elevate one another, and how we do it for ourselves too. One of my closest friends has a beautiful way of viewing everything, including the most challenging experiences in life, of literally thanking them for teaching and growing her, for serving her in some way, and releasing them when the time is right. Some experiences are, of course, easier to thank, particularly in hindsight. A B+ in physics, sure. But what about cancer? Are there really silver linings to even our deepest scars? The ones that don't ever completely fade, even once they've healed? Cancer's reminded me of how much I love to write and speak and share, of how much I love to try to inspire others. If I've done that during our time together, then tonight is one more indication to me that there's meaning and purpose to this journey I'm on, for me and for everyone I encounter along the way, including all of you. Tonight enabled our individual paths to intersect in a beautiful moment of togetherness in a space we have all, whether decades ago or now, called home. A shared but shared moment in all of our journeys, one I hope you will agree was divine and meant to be.